Oh, guys, gals, and envy pals, welcome to the Monday Discourse for today, November 23rd, 2020. I am your host, Tristan Johnson, the host of YouTube channels Tristan Won't Shut Up and Step Back History. Yeah, I got a whole lot to talk about, or I guess not a whole lot to talk about today, but hello. For anyone who doesn't know, as I said, Tristan, Step Back History, Tristan Won't Shut Up. My streaming schedule, I stream 3 days a week. I stream on Mondays, which you're watching right now, from 12 to 2. Typically, I'm joined by Mia Mulder, who has an appointment today that she could not move, so she will not be joining us today. So it's just going to be just me, which goes from 12 till 2 Eastern. And on Tuesday nights from 7 to 9, I do Step Back Tonight, which is sort of like my evening show, where I hang out with folks and we just kind of chill and, shoot the shit. And now I've made some changes, so I'll be a lot more responsive in the chat. So that'll be a lot more of an enjoyable 2-hour experience. And then on Fridays from 12 till 2, I do a stream called The Reactor, where people send stuff through the Discord and we look at it, we watch it together, we react. It's all very, very fun. Just want to mention, for fun's sake, that this Friday, the stream that this Friday's stream is actually coinciding with not only a Step Back release, but also the birthday of Tristan Johnson, the host of Step Back History. So I don't know how I'm going to do anything special, but I am. It is a what's it called? It is a birthday stream for me. How good for me. I go by he, him pronouns, and my work can be found at stepbackhistory.com or tristanwon'tshutup.com. If you are on Twitch and you have Amazon Prime, you get 1 free Twitch subscription per month, and if you don't use it, Jeff Bezos gets to keep your money to have sex with it. This is confirmed. That's what he does with it. Specifically your money, whoever you are. You just all over with the with the leftover money from Twitch Prime subscriptions. And I would recommend that if you use that free subscription, because those subscriptions really do help independent Twitch creators, pay their bills and feed their cats and keep their operations going. Streams take a lot of energy and they take a lot of work, and it would be really nice for you to help one out. If you choose to help me out, I would be, of course, grateful, but I just hope that you help somebody out at the very least. And if you want to check out my latest videos, this is coffee, by the way. Nice coffee. The latest Tristan Won't Shut Up video was about the 2020 election. I have another video that I'm shooting for that on Tuesday. So my hope is that on Thursday you're going to get a new Tristan Won't Shut Up, and it's going to be about Amazon specifically. So that's fun. This is going to be at Amazon, about how Amazon's internal planned economy runs and what we can steal, and sort of the innovations involved with that. It's going to be great. It's a video about logistics. Everyone loves logistics. And the latest Step Back video is on the militia movement, and specifically how it was born out of different hate groups and the Vietnam War experience, and sort of meshing together into a kind of unified front of the militia white power movement that we have today. My next video on that is a follow-up. It is a video on... It's actually just became available for patrons last night. So if you're a patron, you can watch it right now. And with no sponsorship or ads or anything. And that is a video about how the white power movement raised money, recruited, and what its organizational structure looked like. Then after that's done, that video should be coming out on Friday. Then I should be, hopefully, working on another video for about mid-December, which is going to be taking a break from the series for one video. I plan to make a video about a thing called what do I call it? Japan. I'm doing a video on sort of Japan. I've decided to kind of do a video on how Japan went from utter devastation after World War II to one of the most powerful economies in the world. So, be a fun, brief history of kind of post-war Japan and how Japan became Japan. How do we go from nuclear devastation to anime? So that'll be a fun series of video to do, because it's with a very special new sponsor, and they wanted a video on Japan. So this will be hopefully you guys will enjoy it. And if you don't, I'll just go back to making more videos about the white power movement, because that's part of the plan anyway. And yes, so that's everything with upcoming content. I also have for you guys, I'm going to put this in the chat right now, I've decided that I'm not going to be just taking questions from the chat anymore. Like, I still will answer some if they're like really fast, or if there's something like quick or something. But if you ask a question in the chat, hey, Sarah Grace, thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you for buying me some cat food for my kitty cats. Yes, questions. People like to ask questions in the chat. There's been sort of like a thing set up around it, but now the stream has gotten a bit too busy for me to keep up with them anymore. So in order for me to stay up to date with the chat, to keep moderating and responding to people, I have added a link that you can submit links to. Enter Komiki, thank you for following. Welcome to the Orc Gang. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. This is a place where you can submit questions, and I will get to it, possibly not this stream. It might be in future streams, but the question will always be, will get answered at some point. I can veto some questions, but for the most part, I'll try to answer everyone. If you ask questions in the chat, I will either try to answer it quickly, or I might answer it if we run out of questions and stuff like that, but don't go with the expectation that it's going to get answered in this stream. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to put the link in now. But it's just stepbackhistory.com/stream question. So if that's a thing. And the other thing I want to say is welcome to all of the new people. Please, there are 49 of you watching this stream. If this is your first time watching a Step Back stream, please introduce yourself to the chat and say hello. We've got quite a community going on, and I would love for you to get to know all the other people. So if you're new, say hi. Okay. So I think that's everything. I think I answered all things. What's the chat up to? Let's see. Tristan's lovelies. I'll take it. I like your skeleton mug. Thank you. I bought this from a there's a local group of people. In the summertime here in London, the COVID numbers went really, really down. Like, there was a point where we would go almost a week without even a single case. So it was pretty safe to go to bars and stuff like that and drink. You can only take off your mask when you're sitting at the table, but still, it was relatively safe to go out and do stuff. And they had this wonderful stand at this one brew pub that I was at, where they had this woman who was selling folk art from Mexico. So this, if you look at it, is from a Mexican political cartoon. And I have two of these, because I have another one that has the lady sort of companion to this. And these two people have sort of turned into symbols of Dia de los Muertos, which is one of the coolest holidays, one of the most pretty holidays in the world. So I really like them. And plus they're enamel coated tin, which I think is really awesome. They're very sturdy and they're very pretty and they're thin, so you can fit a lot of liquid in one thing. So it has all the things I want. You had a question submitted for today. Don't worry, it'll stick around. All the questions that are for Mia will be around, so when she's back, Well, I will start with the Mia questions when Mia's back. That's sort of like the way that I do things. And so I'm just going to find all the Mia questions and ask her those first. Just wanted to say I've been watching some Al Jazeera lately based on your recommendations and have been rather enjoying it as a news source. Yes, Al Jazeera is like a legit news source. Like if you want like something that's like big like AP or Reuters or something like that, Al Jazeera's like got a pretty good because like I think I've mentioned this before on streams, like there's two types of news organizations. There's like a group like say like Democracy Now! Or like the Young Turks or Me, or any of these other kind of groups that are sort of like, they don't do news. They are they get their news from other news sources and either re-report them or analyze them or discuss them. And a surprisingly large amount of news sources do this because to do actual like news journalism is extremely expensive. And there are journalists who like go on the ground and go and report on stuff. But usually in most like kind of internet contexts, it's just like, one person who's focused on one specific subject. And so you're kind of limited in what you can do and stuff. But yeah, like, but like AP, Reuters, CNN, Fox, like they are a different type. They're the other type of news organization where they have the money to have bureaus and correspondents and stuff all around the world so that they can have the resources to sort of keep in touch with what's going on globally. And Al Jazeera is one of those types of organizations, but is probably the one that has the best, like, not totally bought into by U.S. propaganda type news service. So that's my favorite one of those. Two step backs in 1 month. Yeah, my hope is that if I can do this right, and I've been working very, very hard, so obviously it's paying off, is to make step backs a little bit more common, to have them happen more frequently. So I've done some stuff behind the scenes to trying to get up to 2 videos a month, just making them shorter, punchier, because I always will find out that not many people, like, probably about like 40% of people who watch a step back video actually finish it. So I'm trying to get that number up to 50% by making the videos a bit shorter and trying to make things on more related subjects. So instead of like making one like, multi-hour long video about the white power movement, I'll find several subjects in the white power movement and cover it in multiple videos over a few months. So hopefully you'll get better videos, punchier videos, and they'll be more common more often, which is good because step back has had some sluggish growth in the last few months because while making one video a month is fun in its own way, its own challenge, it is also still up to the whims of the internet and people's tastes. And so if I make like one video that doesn't do well, it like casts a pall over the whole month. And I had 2 videos, I had 2 months in a row where the video did very poorly, with the Dinesh D'Souza part 2 and the Emma Goldman video, and those 2 happening back to back really hurt the channel. So I'm like, okay, I can't get away. I can't do that again. Yeah. It's interesting doing a Christmas special with Peter Kropotkin. I might not do that anymore. I might do that next year. Just because I'm doing this Japan video, and then after that I'm probably going to want to go back. If the Japan video doesn't do well, which, like, it's a bit of a crapshoot because I don't know what my audience will like when it comes to that kind of stuff, then I might have to do some white power videos to kind of get momentum going back on the channel so that in January I want to make a video about Martin Luther King, and I don't want that to hurt the momentum of the channel too much. So I gotta put these considerations into place now. Please don't say that World War II caused anime, since there was anime films even before then. There was even a Navy propaganda anime film made during the war. Yeah, I that's not what I meant, but okay. Was Japan ready to surrender when the U.S. dropped the nukes? Japan was ready to surrender long before the U.S. dropped the nukes. Japan tried to surrender at the Yalta Conference, but the U.S. didn't listen because they invested so much money into the Manhattan Project. So they didn't want to. They didn't really want. They wanted to use it. They wanted to use the nukes, and so Japan really couldn't have surrendered until they used them in America's mind. Alrighty, what else we got? World War I shouldn't be called World War because most of the fighting was in Europe. Like, dude, there was fighting in Africa and Asia too, yeah. I'm not actually new, but the Twitch view interface is so much better for chatting. Awesome. Well, welcome. I hope to see your words around. Longtime fan, first-time commenter. I was wondering if you would do if you still do religion videos. I'd like to hear your take on Taoism. I'm trying to. It's something that's on like my plans to eventually try and come back to in some capacity. The last ones I didn't do very well, and the last one I did was my Buddhism video, and that one did not do very well. It kind of, like the thing about like those videos that are more on like search topics, like religion videos or country histories, is that they don't do super great when they first come out, but they do better on like long tail type stuff. Like they do well. Like a lot of my Step Back makes a good amount of its money on the fact that I still have videos from like 2016 that are getting views. So and the other thing, so it's a bit of a risk. So I do plan on, hey N412, welcome to the Orc Gang. Thank you for following. So I do get to do that. I do like want to do experimentation and stuff like that because I don't want to be making like videos on like one subject forever. But I do have to balance it out so that the channel's like growth doesn't get hurt too much by doing too much like random shit. Because if there's one thing I'm learning, and I think I figured out what Step Back's problem was, because Step Back has always grown a lot slower than other YouTube channels, is that I experiment too much and I change my format and I do new and weird subjects at way too fast a pace, which means that people come and they see something that they didn't expect and they're like, well, I came here to watch this, so I'm gonna check out. And so I have to make more content that's sort of like what people came to this channel for and what they expect. Not saying that like so I'm kind of gonna do it at like a 2-to-1 ratio type thing. Returning to the religion series wouldn't be a bad idea. A lot of my religion videos still get a reasonable amount of views. The other thing too is that I've kind of run into a wall when it comes to the religion videos because Kogito started doing them, and Kogito does pretty much the exact same shtick that I was doing, except with like flashy animation and like multiple times the audience. So I just thought, oh, okay, so I was doing this idea, and then like Kogito's doing it and doing it better and to a bigger audience. And so if I were to go back to religion videos, I'd end up with like a situation where people were thinking I was ripping off Kogito, which I wasn't like I don't want to step on his toes, and so I'd have to figure out a new way to approach religion topics, because otherwise I'll make a Taoism video and then he'll make a Taoism video and it'll get 6 times the views, and my video will wither on the vine, because those kinds of videos rely a lot on search traffic. I hate that I have to think about these things. I just want to do what I want to do, you know. Alrighty. The right-wing take that wearing a mask is communist. I mean, it is communist in the fact that it is a wearing a mask is communist in the sense that it's about having consideration for other people, while capitalism is usually about the opposite of that. So, yeah. Are you taking questions from the chat or that Google document thing? I'm doing the Google document thing. I'm just like scrolling through the chat first to just see what people are saying, and then I'll get to the questions. They're all there. I have it on the screen. Don't be anxious. Jesus is the truth. Well, I'm glad you found something. Every time I bring up the bombings to my older relatives, they're always like, well, Japan never would have surrendered and would have lost a lot of people taking over Japan. Yeah, every time they reassess the numbers of how many people would have died if the U.S. did the land invasion of Japan. Hey, Mio Fafford, thank you for following. Welcome to our gang. The number always goes down. And also, yeah, that doesn't factor the multiple times Japan tried to surrender before the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it doesn't factor in the fact that Japan was less than a week. At the time of the surrender, it was less than a week away from running out of petroleum, which, like, I don't know if you guys know anything about tanks and airplanes and battleships, but all of those require petroleum to function, and they were running out because the U.S. had embargoed them. That's why they did Pearl Harbor in the first place. Then, on top of that, there is some evidence to say that it wasn't the nuclear bombs that caused Japan to surrender, but it was the fact that after VNE Day, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan, and they were going to start moving Soviet troops from the European front to Manchuria to fight the Japanese in China. And so the Japanese were like, well, we can't beat with the Soviets and the Americans bearing down on us, and the Germans are ostensibly allies taken out of the war. So there was basically no way out. That's why they tried to surrender multiple times before, but the U.S. wouldn't accept it because it was not unconditional. And so they decided to, because they wanted to force the emperor out of, they wanted to destroy the empire title, and then they took over Japan and they let the emperor stay the emperor anyways. It doesn't matter, but it's more that they wanted to nuke Japan so that they could show to the Soviets that they had a deadly doomsday weapon, and they wanted to test it on a bunch of non-white people so that people wouldn't feel bad about it. How well educated is 18th century American politicians compared to the general population today? Yeah. A lot. Well, everybody can read. That's a thing. Do you see any major shifts left for the Cold War propaganda still living in memory? Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we'll see any major shifts while, like, boomers still, despite being a minority now, are still clinging on to all of the levers of power. So maybe when the boomers stop controlling all of the means of production, then maybe we'll start having some changes. But that, which is not as far away as you'd think. Why does the United States hate Palestine's existence? Oh, that's a long and deep question that I don't think I can answer in like just a few seconds. But long story short, it's not so much that they hate Palestine's existence, although, you know, it's part of it. Part of it is being evangelical Christians who need Jews to control all of Israel because it deals with Christian doomsday apocalypse prophecies, and they need the end of the world to come, which involves a whole bunch of stuff coming true that doesn't exist anymore in the Middle East, so they have to like force it to become true. And the other is that Israel is a strategic ally in the Middle East, which is where the oil comes from, which is like an extremely important key strategic ally that they want to hang on to. And so just like how they supported apartheid South Africa because they were a strategic ally, they support apartheid Israel because it's a strategic ally. Do you think Japan surrendered to prevent it becoming split like Germany? I think that the U.S. Definitely advanced and used the nukes as part of, like, they definitely want, that was definitely part of their aims. They didn't want it to end up like Korea, for example. It's also communist in the sense that it's produced by China, which is not communist, and it's producing the masks in Uyghur concentration camps. Oh, let's not have any COVID trutherism here. It wasn't like they manufactured it in a laboratory. Coronavirus has been around for ages. When do we get to submitted questions? I'll get to it. Don't worry. Don't worry. I'm almost caught up. How was it proven that the atomic bombs were used to show the USSR the strength of the US? How well is it proven? That's a hard thing to figure out because Truman obviously didn't write that in his memoirs or anything like that. It has more to do with the fact of it's sort of like put together through the way that he behaved at the Yalta conference was very suspicious, and everybody was sort of like wondering about why he was doing this, why he was acting so like belligerent, which is sort of against his character. And it's called COVID-19 because it was discovered in 2019, not because it's a 19th variant. 95% of U.S. oil comes from Canada. This is true. But what's it called? Saudi Arabia, which is one of the most influential countries in determining what the price of oil is based out of the Middle East. What do you think? What do you think people in Japan think about the bomb? I feel like that's a complex question that I do not have the ability to answer right now. I imagine that there are many different feelings about the bomb, but it's like, stuff like the movie. There's like thoughts that like the original Godzilla movie was sort of some Japanese filmmakers processing what happened and stuff like that. Anyways, let's go to the Google Doc and see what's up. So the first question comes from Comrade Dequack, which asks, please send help. Hillary Clinton has sent me to the Shadow Realm to trying to cure Ninja's ligma, and now I'm stuck with Pete Buttigieg in the internal void. Well, the joke formation part of my brain is trying to answer that, but that is such a zoomer thing to say that I don't exactly know even how to process it. But I read the thing that you wanted me to read, so congratulations. India are in conflict with China. What do you see as its outcome? I see possibly Cold War stuff, like the fact that you guys had a border war or a border conflict earlier this year that was fought with like people attacking each other with bits of rebar and shit, when this is two countries that have nuclear weapons and stuff. Like, what's it called? I could, like, there's going to be turf wars about influence and stuff like that, but I can't see it going. I can't, like, the mutually assured destructionness is pretty apparent in both. And at the same time, India is sort of on the back foot because it has a built-in enemy, while China doesn't as much. In that China just needs to say, hey, Pakistan, do you want some free shit? And do you want to form an alliance with me? And if Pakistan and China start working together, India's like in a pretty bad position at that point. So this is a question from Aerial Warrior Twins. How would the Soviet Union handle coronavirus if it still existed? Good question. Good question. Depends on, what the state of the Soviet Union is by the time we get to 2020. Like for example, the Soviet, like near the end of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev's plans for sort of keeping it together when he did like Glasnost and Perestroika and stuff like that was to change the Soviet Union from being like this very centralized, top-down authoritarian system to something more akin to like the European Union, where all of the different Soviet socialist republics would be sort of part of a democratic force that would function more like the EU, which fell apart very quickly because a lot of those countries, as soon as they had multi-party elections, voted anti-communist parties into power, which sort of made everything sort of fall apart. But yeah, like so if that was the point of the Soviet Union, I could imagine that if it's there's a lot of different points of divergence. if this was like Khrushchev era Soviet Union, or like even Brezhnev era Soviet Union, I could see either something very successful, like Vietnam's example, where they would be able to say, hey, you have to stay home from work. You can't do, like, you have to quarantine yourself. We're going to pay you. I could also see complete denial of the disease mixed with, like complete virus denial combined with, like, I don't know, like, just completely censoring and shutting off any information that says to the contrary. So, like, things are really bad, but they're not admitting it because the Soviet Union did stuff like that sometimes. I could see something like what's happening in China, where they have a pretty good grasp on it, but they only did it because of, like, being able to mobilize huge amounts of pandemic testing. By the way, Stu294, thank you for following. Welcome to York Gang. And Mio Fafard, sorry. So, I could see the Soviet Union going down a whole bunch of different routes. One is, not doing a suitable job, because the Soviet Union was in pretty dire straits near the end of its lifetime. And if it lasted another 20 years, it'd probably be in very, very dire straits, which makes me think that it would, it might fail to do those kinds of things because the state would just not be able to enforce things like that. Hey, Pamphleteer, thank you for subscribing.
Love your work.
Aw, thank you so much. 30 years, sorry, 30 years. Or 29 years, I guess I should say. Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 on Christmas Day or Boxing Day or something like that. It was very close to Christmas. Like, it was either Christmas Day or the day after Christmas that the Soviet Union collapsed. Did you ever make a video about the fall of the Soviet Union? I did. It was probably not like my best video. It's from very, very long ago. It was a collaboration with the Cynical Historian, but it was back when my videos were all animated and they were a lot shorter. And I can guarantee you, like, it would not have been as good as if I had made it today, because, you know, I'm a different person. But you know, it could be something I return to. I do have, as a Patreon stretch goal, I do have to at some point make the rest of my, I have a Soviet Union Dead Countries video as one of my stretch goals for Patreon, and I think patrons have passed it, so I have to make it at some point. There's no Twitch in NDRS with subbing quality content. Well, thank you, Vinayak. What part of India are you from? Like, you from, like, Punjabi, Telugu, Gujarati, trying to think of some other, Tamil. I'm running out of parts of India that I know. Why'd all the Soviet countries vote out the communists? Mostly because a lot of those countries were Soviet satellite states that... So first of all, the Soviet Union in 1991 was an utter disaster. The country had basically fallen apart. There was already a coup attempt earlier that year that failed, but it did show that, like, confidence in the Soviet Union was already pretty shaken. The Soviet economy was basically at the point of collapse. And all that kind of stuff together meant that there was... And also... a lot of countries, especially those more on the periphery, like countries like Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Estonia, Latvia, even countries that were not part of the USSR were sort of, hey, Dorncall, thank you for subscribing.
Whoop, whoop.
Thank you. Whoop, whoop. Thank you for subscribing. Much appreciated. Keeping them cats fed. Yeah, so the Soviet Union was... Hey, you have a question for me? Zane? Who... Zane, you always ask very good questions with your super chats. I do wonder what makes you think what makes you think that when you think of a question you're like, ooh, I should answer that question. What makes the then next step being like, I should ask Tristan this question, and because I want to know what he thinks about it, and because I would be curious to figure out why people think that. Not saying that it's bad. I'm just saying I don't understand it. But yeah, so talking about the end of the USSR. The USSR was on the brink of collapse. The economy was in the shitter. They were like nothing was working anymore. They had just finished a very very bad defeat in Afghanistan that cost them dearly. Hey, right in the middle. Thank you for following. Welcome to our gang. You're Bengali? Bangladesh and India are native to Bengalis. Ah, okay. So you're from that part of kind of like. So you're from that part of India that has that border with Bangladesh that's like very, very messy, that they've been trying to clean up for years now, right? Because like when Bangladesh or what originally it was called East Pakistan, when East Pakistan broke off from India, the border between Bangladesh and India was very, very messy, and so they like it's one of the most complicated borders in the world right now. Like there are like pockets of India and Bangladesh and pockets of Bangladesh and India, and like just like the borders just. And so for the last like few decades, India and Bangladesh have been trying to negotiate a way to make the borders just not be like absolute paradox border gore type stuff. But as far as I know, it's been a very slow process. Yeah, so the Soviet Union near the end of its life. Also, keep in mind the Soviet Union also, in its more peripheral countries, like I said, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, all these countries, they were not doing very well. Like the Soviet Union very much was like Russia and friends. And so people who were part of the Soviet Union but didn't kind of fit into, like, weren't part of like the kind of Russian cultural hegemony, were not given the best of treatment. And also a lot of those countries had like the Russian language imposed on them and sort of Russian cultural imperialism put on them. That's why there's so many Russian speaking people in places like Ukraine. But also any Azerbaijani person over a certain age learned Russian when they were in school, as an example. So there's a lot of people who are like, who they voted against communism as a way to say, fuck the Russians. And there are some people who voted because communism hadn't been a very good experience for them, because the Soviet Union kind of treated them like shit. And, you know, it had not been long enough before they were like, you know, they don't remember what it was like under the Tsar or whatever. They just wanted something different. Which, you know, it's part of politics. And so, yeah, the whole thing was like not being, what's it called? The whole thing was just being held together by very weak ties, and it led to everything kind of falling apart. So my guess is that if the Soviet Union somehow lumbered on for another 3 decades, that it would be in a very bad situation today, and that it probably would have not had the political or economic power to be able to do like successful things like Vietnam did. And so I imagine that it would handle it very poorly. But if somehow they got their shit together, maybe the Soviet Union would have been able to do something good like a Vietnam. So again, the ideology is... Sometimes it's what's on my mind. I want a socialist/Canadian perspective, or I found something to challenge your view. Well, thank you, Zane. Those are very good answers. And thank you for another $5 super chat. Much appreciated. Sometimes wondering if the Soviet Union even believed in or the Soviet ruling class even believed in communism. When places like Poland did worker councils, like in Poznan. Yeah, it's true. Like they suppressed a lot of like union movements, workers' rights movements, and on top of that, like the thing is like, hey, thank you for donating $4.20. Nice. Hello from Palestine, loving the show. Well, thank you. The revolution is now much appreciated. You guys are great. Is Canada a satellite of the U.S.? Yes and no. We're very culturally tied to the United States. We do. Our economy is extremely intertwined with the United States, to the point where we're each other's largest trading partners. And the Canadian economy is heavily dependent on the United States. The United States less so on Canada, but it would still be bad for both of us. But Canada doesn't necessarily take marching orders from the United States. Like we've had, like, depends really on the Prime Minister. We've had various different levels of relationships with the United States, and Canadian Prime Ministers do tend to try and take distinct stances from the United States, which would kind of take us outside of being a satellite. Like, for example, Canada didn't go to war with Iraq. We refused. And, like, Justin Trudeau had a very bad relationship with Donald Trump. So, like, kind of. Cody predicted the USSR would only survive by going hardcore totalitarian North Korea style. Agree? I think the Soviet Union, if it had rolled out its glasnost and perestroika problems a little bit slower, and if it had tried to fix the deep economic problems in the Soviet Union with something other than injecting capitalism into it, I think that they might have been able, like, they should have done the work to try and restore faith in the Soviet model by, like, being better at running a planned economy and being better at, like, doing, like managing things. But because, like, basically what they did is, like, here's a bunch of capitalism to make you completely lose faith in the Soviet project, and then we're going to let you vote on where you want things to go, and it led to a lot of the collapse. And I think that if they did that, if they had focus on rehabilitating the Soviet economy without injecting capitalism into it, it would have done well. Cold War Italy was basically a U.S. satellite, TBH. Yeah, kind of. Thank you for the super chat, by the way, Matt. But I do think that it's a bit. I mean, Italy was kind of a war zone of the Cold War. And thank you, Lillian So and SKCRW2. Thank you for following. Welcome to our gang. Like, the U.S. invested a lot of CIA assets in Italy. A lot. And so, because of that, I think that, like, the Soviets and the Americans were trying to... It was sort of like a battleground of the Cold War, rather than like a satellite, a U.S. satellite. Owning the hardcore tankies and the neo-libs, admittedly hard for Gorbachev, but still possible. Yeah, I do wonder if Gorbachev... Like, I don't know if there was a way out for the Soviet Union at the point that Gorbachev took it over. There was also there's sort of the elephant in the room about Chernobyl, and how Chernobyl was extremely embarrassing and a massive and expensive disaster for the Soviet Union that they never really recovered from. Mikhail Gorbachev even said... later, after the Soviet Union's collapse, because the guy's still alive. He's like 90-something, but he's still alive. He said something around the lines of, like, that what's it called? That the fight between... how do I explain this? That Chernobyl was sort of, to him, the sign that this was the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union, that, like, things were kind of falling apart. Are there U.S.-Canadian border disputes? There are. They're not exactly, like, going to cause fights, but most of the Canadian border has been decided. A good chunk of it was decided after the American Revolution. They came together and said everything, like, through this and this is Canadian. And then also, when westward expansion happened, they agreed, like, on the parallel that things would happen. But, like, for example, the 43rd parallel was where the line, like, in the west between Canada and the U.S. would be. But the United States settled west a lot faster than Canada. And Canada eventually ended up settling the west in, like, a very, very rapid and short amount of time, because they were afraid that the Americans just weren't going to listen to that treaty. And then also there's disputed ownership of different areas of the Arctic. There's dispute over a couple things. There's dispute over some areas of territorial water in Maine, where Nova Scotia and Maine are kind of fighting over who owns a certain area of lobster-rich water in the Atlantic Ocean. And also, there's one part, because the map that was used to decide the borders after the American Revolution was a little wonky. There's this peninsula that is legally in America, or, like, where, like, the bottom tip of it is legally in America, but the top of it is in Canada. And so people who live on the tip of this peninsula have to actually travel up to Canada to go back into, I think, Michigan to do this stuff, and like, so like there's like it leads to all sorts of weird problems where like Canada, where like they have to bus, like the like American students have to bus through Canada to get to school. There's also something like that in BC and Washington as well, because at one point Britain had claim over what would today be Washington State, and they gave it up when they made that treaty for the 43rd parallel, and so there's some issues in there as well. So, but a lot of it is like not big enough and not like a huge deal. So Americans America and Canada don't really make a big deal about it. Like, I think there's like a petition to try and move that little bit of that peninsula back into Canada, but like Maine's not going to do it. Or sorry, someone pointed out is Minnesota. So Minnesota's not going to do it. Canada is not going to like, you know, press the issue, because it would kind of sour relationships with the United States. And so it just kind of never gets dealt with, and no one really cares. The only one that might actually become an issue is the fact that territorial waters between Maine and Nova Scotia over has turned into very lucrative areas for lobster trapping, which is leading to like it's actually like a very big pet issue in Maine, to the point where Maine's first district or whatever in the U.S. election. Hey, that fairy boy! Thank you for following. Welcome to our game. Maine, during that part, the Maine splits up its electoral districts for electoral college votes, and they gave Trump one because Trump came in and said that he was going to fight for territorial water rights with Canada, which made all the lobster fishermen do that. Y'all can have Alaska, enjoy. It's actually there's actually a funny story about that too, which is because the Canadian borders right now shut down to American travel. There's one exception, which is if you are driving to Alaska, because you have to go through Canada to get to Alaska. And so you are allowed past the border, but they literally say, like, it's illegal for you to essentially leave your car. You have 24 hours. You have to drive straight up to Alaska and cross the border at the first possible border. And if you fuck around, we're gonna like find you. And it was like their way of trying to stop America's COVID from spilling into Canada by people, but people still need to get to Alaska, so that's a thing. So people are just trapped in that peninsula now that the Canadian border's closed. I don't know how that part that peninsula is dealing with now that the border's closed. My guess is that they have a sort of special dispensation, just like the people who are driving to Alaska. Canada and America have, they have benefited greatly from the fact that our two countries have never been in a really bad relationship with each other, and our border is so big that like we can have a little bit more of like a low pressure amicable relationship, because two countries with that much of a land border, geopolitically they should be always at each other's throats, but Canada and America are not, because and it has been remarkably peaceful. Get back to the Google Doc? How about you don't tell me what to do? What's it called? The questions aren't going anywhere. They're not disappearing. Are you not entertained? Am I being boring? But yeah, it was sort of petered out, the whole talk of the Soviet Union and coronavirus, so I guess we can move on to the next thing. Because Canada's America's a little bitch baby when it comes to geopolitics. I mean, it's fair. What's it called? Pierre Trudeau compared Canadian-American relations as trying to share a bed with an elephant, which is like, it's fine as long as the elephant never rolls over. Because Canada's got like what, the 19th largest military on Earth, and the United States is like almost 50%. Like it is like larger than the several of the largest militaries on Earth combined. Like, what do you do? And it also has like what's it called? Has like almost 10 times our population. 19th largest isn't that bad. Yeah, Canada does have a strangely large military for a country with only 37 million people because of our commitments to NATO and shit, which I think is like ridiculous. I think we should probably, divest our military quite a bit, but yeah. Canada isn't really a strong military power. Canada's geopolitical stance is to have strong diplomatic ties that keep us safe. And that has been our sort of strategy forever, I think. Let's see. What do we got next? This is Matt Lipton's question. Would Stephen Harper count as a war criminal like Bush and Blair, or is Canada's involvement in the Forever Wars different? I mean, Canada's, as far as I know, Canada's role in the Forever Wars, like, Stephen Harper inherited the Forever War, didn't he? Like, the only Forever War Canada got itself wrapped up in is Afghanistan, and I think we're out of Afghanistan now, and we have been for some time. Stephen Harper probably kept it going longer than it should have, but if I remember, the Afghanistan entanglement started with, like, was Jean Chrétien, not with Harper. Harper sucks for a lot of reasons, but war criminal, maybe not. Are you a believer in abolishing militaries? Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. 100%. The fact that every country has to have a standing army at all times, when, like, anybody who knew anything about the past knew that, like, permanent standing armies are basically a recipe for ending democracy. Like, no country should have a permanent standing military. Not just because war generally sucks, but also when you're constantly investing in a permanent standing military, what that results in is your country always sort of looking for a war to fight to justify the cost of it, which is bad. So this is another Matt Lipton question. Do you think the CBC could pull off doing a Canadian version of the BBC show Question Time? Like having people from the main federal parties asking politicians questions directly? I don't actually know what the BBC... I don't even know what the BBC show Question Time is about. Do, like, the general public just gets to ask politicians questions? Is that what Question Time is? Because, I mean, we do have Power in Politics, which is sort of like CBC's politics show, but I imagine that's different. How do you get a military like the U.S. is divested? I don't know, because there is, yeah, as you said, like, there are, like, multi-billion-dollar corporations that have, donate very deep to American political causes, or to American politicians, because they know, because their entire, like, revenue source comes from a completely out-of-control Pentagon budget. Watched a movie set during World War II, and it kind of depicted Canada and Britain's militaries being merged during the war. Is that accurate? I'm pretty sure we did work pretty close with each other, yeah. I'm pretty sure that, like, the Allied effort was largely coordinated by Britain. Like, a lot of, outside of the United States, everybody who was, like, fighting on behalf of the Allies were either fighting through the through the organization of the United States or through the organization of the United Kingdom, and that's like why all of like the Canadian military stuff, like our staging ground in Europe, was all in London and stuff like that. So, yeah. So that's what Question Time is. I mean, I think that you could possibly do that, but the thing is that the Prime Minister in Canada, I think, is like way less connected to the people than even the British Prime Minister. And our Prime Ministers tend to not feel like they need to take questions from the public, usually. We've never been technically a single service in the British since the second board, but yeah, incredibly close coordination. Yeah. Someone post a link to the question thing? I can do that because I have the link. It's stepbackhistory.com/stream questions, though. Or stream question. Let me get my thing. I need to figure out how to get Nightbot so I can post this regularly. Yeah, like, I don't know. Our Prime Minister is like, I mean, the thing about doing like Canadian version of Question Time is that like Canada, like, we have a Prime Minister who didn't show up to a leaders debate during the last election, and he won election. Like, Canadians don't follow politics very well. And on top of that, our Prime Minister's the thing about Canada, and the issue with Canada, is that Canada is essentially a single party dictatorship that that has one political party that basically thinks that it doesn't have to actually do any campaigning, doesn't really have to worry about votes, doesn't really have to be accountable to anybody. And I don't know if Question Time is going to get around that. Because, like, the Liberals could just refuse to participate, and they'd still, like, win every election. What's the average Canadian's attitude towards Indians? It's fine. There's a lot of Indians who live in Canada. Canada's one of the places where a lot of the Indian diaspora happens. So, like, for example, I grew up around a lot of Indian people. To the point where, like, Bollywood stars come to Canada and they get, like, mobbed because we have just a huge Indian community. So, we you know, I don't know about India specifically, but just there is, like, what's it called? There are just a lot of Indians who live in Canada. He thinks they were talking about the other kind of Indian? I don't. I mean, I don't know. Vinayak's from India, so that's what I was thinking. All right. Next question. Your militia movement video was great, from Sir Zhao Zhao. Thank you. It's very kind of you. Let's see. Have I refreshed? Does that get me? Okay. How did the Scandinavian countries avoid having their own version of Thatcher and Reagan in the 80s? I'm going to mark that as one for Mia Mulder. I feel like Mia could answer that one better than me. Thank you, Mr. Mosby, for following. Welcome to York Gang. Let's see. You know how some countries, China, India, Russia, can often use anti-imperialist rhetoric to justify their own often imperialistic foreign policies in Hong Kong or Ukraine, or postmodern rhetoric to justify their human rights abuses? How do we engage and respond to such arguments? I mean, I don't have like a, genius answer beyond calling a spade and saying, this is imperialism. Whether or not you, like, what's it called? Like, I think that, in my opinion, those excuses like, hey, we're being anti-imperialism by annexing the Crimean Peninsula, is like it rings hollow, and I think a lot of people realize that it rings hollow. Hey, Motivic, thank you for following. Welcome to York Gang. And the only people who really buy into those arguments, first of all, it's just a established excuse that's like tiny thin excuse that these countries use, and I don't think anyone actually buys it. They just need to say something. And on top of that, the only people who really do buy into it are like the Tulsi left, the Greenwald left. Hey, Alan G. Dundee, thank you for following. That's a really fun name to say. Are Canadian Conservatives not going to be able to win again due to just liberal strongholds in Ontario? Well, what happens in Canada in every election is that the GTA, first of all, figuring out what the fuck Quebec is doing, because Quebec is kind of having a political, kind of a big political sea change. But once, so basically, like the Liberals, like the way about Canada works is that you've got the Liberals basically dominate the entire Maritimes. They usually dominate in Newfoundland. Then they get a fair amount of seats in Quebec, and what's it called? And in BC. And then the conservative stronghold is the entire prairies. They just like paint the entire prairies. And so the battleground usually comes down to the GTA, which is the suburbs around Toronto, which sort of bubble between liberal and conservative depending upon the election. And so I think that the Liberals could very easily win, or sorry, the Conservatives could very easily win an election if one was called in the near future. Justin Trudeau has been doing a lot of crimes lately, more so than even your typical Liberal politician, because the last time a Liberal government fell apart is because they were basically doing crimes in Quebec with the whole Quebec sponsorship scandal. But you know, Justin Trudeau's been taking bribes from like We Charity and stuff like that I feel like is going to hang around his neck for a bit longer. The Conservatives just had a leadership race, and Aaron O'Toole is, I don't know too much about him, but he's like kind of, it looks like he seems like he's a pretty good leader for the Tories, because the Tories sort of pride themselves on having a base that's made up of like hooting hogs, like all the chuds, but prides itself on being sort of like center right, responsible conservatives. And but I think Aaron O'Toole says just enough dog whistles to get the hogs on board, and so he might be able to, you know, use Trump-esque rhetoric to get just enough, like you know, just like not like full Trump, but just like, you know, Trump flavored LaCroix, you know, just a little, just like the hint of a flavor of Trump, in order to get the hogs on board, but to not alienate, because like the whole thing is the Conservatives always have like, they have the prairies, which is like Hogtown, like what's it called, like basically like conservative strongholds, borderline fascists, like what's it called, you've got like the Sons of Odin in like Alberta and stuff like that, like they are just like voting on straight on like, we hate the West or we hate the East, we're racist, sexist, homophobic, all the things. We want to destroy the environment with all due respect. Like that's like the conservative stronghold in the West, and they've got that on lockdown. But they have to like appeal to the hogs, and then in the GTA, they have to be more moderate, because like you have to appeal to people like, like my parents who live in the suburbs and vote liberal or conservative based on how much they feel good about each individual leader. And so, depending upon how that works, liberals and conservatives will swap the election. So it really depends. Do you think Canada would have a full outright Trump as prime minister? I don't think so. I think our political culture kind of doesn't allow it at this point in time. If you could make an unholy alliance between like, hey, Smokey Dregs, thank you for following. Welcome to York Gang. If you could have a Canadian politics, Canadian conservative, see, here's the thing. And Matt will get this. One of the things that I don't know why I keep referring to them as the hogs, the chuds out in the West. If there's one thing that they hate more than anything else, maybe not as much as people of color, but besides, like, they have this strong, deep, visceral hatred of French Canadians. To the point where if you have a Quebec license plate and you go through the West, you might end up with your car being keyed. They absolutely despise French Canadians. But here's the thing. French Canada, especially Quebecois political culture, has been drifting very far to the right in the last maybe half decade. It's getting more openly racist. There is a growing flourishing of neo-Nazis. They just the two political parties in Quebec, the Parti Québécois and the Liberal Party, they just dropped that duality to elect the Coalition Avenir Québec, which is this far right-wing nationalist party. But the thing is, these two groups hate each other. But if some fascist was able to find some way to get like the Sons of Odin Alberta fascists and the Quebecois like Lone Wolf or Wolf Pack, I think is the name of their there's a neo-Nazi group in Quebec called the Wolf Pack. If they could get those two kind of fascy people to work together towards a common political cause, you could have like a kind of like Trump character, because if you can carry the West and all of Quebec, then like you've got the country. Because you can just get there's enough conservative seats in Ontario that if you had Quebec and Alberta, you could like you could just have it happen. But like at this moment, Quebec still like the Conservative Party is too associated with like basically being a political party that is like the Conservative Party right now is basically just the party that represents petrol dollars in Alberta, and that's basically their only interest. And so Quebec doesn't like that. And the thing is that the Conservative Party is worried that if they go too much into like the nativist racist stuff, that they're going to lose a lot of like immigrant votes in the GTA, which means that they will like lose their election. So they have like some conservative leader would have to make that gamble of like losing the GTA to pick up a whole bunch of seats in Quebec. And if they pick up those seats in Quebec, not alienating their seats in the West, which is going to be a delicate balance that I don't know if the Canadian right can do successfully. I don't know if there's a leader that has come into the light that can do something like that. But like, and so, you know, when the Conservatives can't do that, then the Liberal Party just mops up. So. But, yeah. I don't think you could get Alberta chuds to tolerate Quebec chuds. Yeah, that's the big problem, right? So that's sort of the thing. That's sort of like what's going on in Canadian politics when it comes to the Canadian right. And because of that divide, because the Conservative Party in Canada is it's dipping its toe into like more fashy nativist shit, but they're very tepid about it, and they're very worried about going too far to the right because they know that the GTA will, like, they have lost elections by going too far to the right and getting burned by the GTA. And so that sort of like balances things to some extent. And in that sense, like, the Liberal Party just cleans up house, because right now the NDP party, our only left-wing party, is sort of in the woods. They had a bunch of seats in Quebec that they lost because they elected a leader named Jagmeet Singh. And as I mentioned, Canadian or Quebecois, if there's one thing that Quebecois people hate more than Albertans, it's brown people. And so Quebec, like what's it called, the NDP lost a lot of seats in Quebec when they elected a Sikh man who wears a turban as the leader of the party. Yeah. And oh boy, when he was made leader of the NDP, you should have seen the racism. Like, they were like trying to get him to dismiss like Tamil terrorists and stuff like that, and it's just like, why the fuck are you doing this? Anyways, this is where we are. So the next election will probably end up being a conservative or liberal minority government, depending upon how much Justin Trudeau pisses off everybody with this COVID response. And yeah, to answer the question, yeah, like, I already answered this question, so let's move on to the next one. And actually, I think I'm going to take a quick washroom break, but I'll be back to answer Sir Zhao Zhao's question next. Oh, this isn't a question. This is just make a video about this, so I'll just delete that. Because I already know what my Japan video is going to be about. All right, I'll answer the next question next. So I'll be back in a moment. Hey everybody, I'm back. Thank you for your patience. Oh, sorry, I was away for the super chat. Thank you, Quintwell, for the 5 British pound sterlings. What do you think people like? What do you think of people like Steve Bannon and their goals? How do you think that's going for them? So Steve Bannon, noted fascist enabler. I think that I think that the kind of there's still some question marks about whether Donald Trump actually is like deep down a fascist in his bones or if he's just an idiot. I think that Steve Bannon is a fascist and knows he's a fascist and is actively trying to make it happen. So I think that Donald Trump's loss is a setback and he knows it. And I think it'll be a setback for far right organization. But I also imagine that Steve Bannon is already plotting his next move. He's been kicked off Twitter for saying that they should kill public officials. And Steve Bannon. So I don't know what Steve Bannon's next plan is, but I do imagine that he's trying to think about how to destroy democracy, because that's basically his goal. Yeah. Alrighty. So, next question we got here. Remember when the non-binary person got elected as a state senator in Oklahoma? I was slightly disappointed, and I found that when I found they're okay with she/her pronouns, because I wanted to know how many of the GOP state senators would refuse to use they/them when addressing them. Do you think it'd be all of them? I do think it'd be all of them. I think that what's it called? It would take a while for. I would even be surprised if that Oklahoma state senator decided to actually like change their preference about pronouns publicly in order to be more electable, because I imagine that a non-binary person running on they/them pronouns would actually have some issues getting elected still would have some issues getting elected in America. And so I even if they preferred going by they/them, I think that they'd probably change it. And if by some miracle that happened, I do think that several Republicans and probably a lot of Democrats would probably refuse to acknowledge it. So. Let's see. What are both your thoughts? This is not a question for me. This is a question for both me and Mia Mulder, so I will save that one. Do you think the authoritarian leaders who rose up in South America in the later half of the 20th century were fascists? Like, was Pinochet a fascist? I mean, yeah, Pinochet was most definitely a fascist. They were military. The thing is, like, it really depends. Like, the thing is about fascism is that it is a word that Trump 2020. Aw, cute. Well, sorry, I prefer people who win elections. Anyways, do you think the authoritarian leaders who rose up in South America? So, I do think. So you're talking about like Operation Condor type, like those military juntas that kind of controlled a whole bunch of South America. He won. Aw, it's so cute that you're dense enough to think that. Hey, thanks for the 420 tip. What do you think will become of Israel-Palestine? Oh boy, that's a good question. So at the moment, things are kind of at a low point because Trump's position towards Israel was basically just to say go for it and wipe the Palestinians off the face of the planet. He doesn't care. Biden's position is going to probably be something similar, but he's not going to want to be as open about like just kill the Palestinians. And so I don't know what Biden's position is going to be on Israel-Palestine. And I don't know what the next step I know that as long as Netanyahu is in charge of Israel, it's going to be pretty tough to have any sort of meaningful peace process move forward. But it seems like Israel, despite trying so hard, just can't get rid of him, which sucks. Are you a liberal because you were born looking like this? I don't even know what that means. I'm not a liberal. I would never be a liberal. But they cheated. They cheated by more people voting than him. Oh no! Oh no! Your precious little baby! You don't get to do vegan. You don't get to get your fascist ethno state. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Alright. Oh, thank you for $5 super chat, King John Targaryen the First. You said something about Tulsi left and Greenwald left. Tulsi I don't trust when she has the same views as Muslims as Sam Harris in the War on Terror. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of Tulsi Gabbard either. Hugo Chavez. Yeah, that was that. It's like Hugo Chavez rigged the 2020 election 7 years after his death. Man, some power, some potent stuff there. Meanwhile, what's it called? Meanwhile, like fucking Rudy Giuliani's like melting hair, like his hair is melting while he's doing the talk. Man, that was that. First of all, just trying to undermine a completely lawful election with just random bullshit with no evidence. And then his like hair melting and just being so ridiculous. Like, we really need a word that's sort of like the simultaneous feeling of being terrified and something that is hilarious at the same time. Can you tell in detail why Pinochet was a fascist? I mean, he was a dictator who murdered his political rivals by like the tens of thousands, and also elevated white Chileans into power and restructured the entire economy to basically disadvantage the majority of the population to benefit a small elite. Sounds kind of fashy to me. I hate these Trump errors taking over the stream. Oh no, it's fine. It's cute. They're what's it called? They're so emasculated by the idea that their big wet boy lost the election that they have to act out on some random dipshit's Twitch stream. Just a different perspective from a real journalist. Oh boy, what's this? Oh, a real journalist called K. Von Comedy. I don't know. This is bullshit. The tangents take up time for better topics. Wow. Wow. Alright, I gotta keep scrolling. The campaign disavowing lawyer lady shows at least a semblance of sanity. Giuliani. Haha. Alright, oh, Quint, thank you for another £2. Thank you. How did you / what made you become a socialist? Oh, that is a good question. There's like this idea that maybe we should be starting to talk about, you're not some random dipshit, you're our dipshit. Aw, thank you. So I have never really been, not a socialist, really. So basically, like my parents are liberals, as far as I can tell. Hey, McPoppin' Lockins, thank you for following. That's another fun name to say. So when I first became politically aware, the first politically aware thoughts that I remember having was in the mid-90s when I was like 6 years old, being kind of nervous about the Quebec referendum because a lot of my family is French Canadian and we didn't want Quebec to separate. And the second was the 2000 election, where I was just parroting my mom's opinion that Al Gore should stop whining. That's like maybe the most right-wing position I've ever taken in my life. But I was also 11, so whatever. That's not, you don't have a real brain when you're 11 years old. So first time I ever got like interested in political stuff was probably like following what happened after 9/11. 9/11 I was 9/11 I was, I want to say, like 12, 13 years old, and I sort of just kind of kept following along what was going on, and I remember just becoming like super against the Iraq War. 2002 was the movie Bowling for Columbine, which affected me greatly, which was a Michael Moore documentary. So like I was just very much into progressive causes when I was a high schooler, and then by the time I graduated, I was at least a social democrat at the very least, and by 2009 I had already become a socialist pretty or some point in that. I don't exactly remember what exactly did it, but primarily it was driven by anti-U.S. imperialism in Iraq and the war on terror stuff. And then I became an anarchist in 2009, basically as a result of the fallout of, Obama getting elected, nothing happening, and everybody sort of just going to sleep as soon as their party won. So. We need that citations needed button. Oh yeah, it's right here. Wait, did Quebec vote to separate from Canada? It did twice. They did one in the 1980s and one in the 1990s. It came pretty close in the 1990s, but Quebec didn't separate. It lost by like 50,000 votes or something like that. And then the losers of the referendum, one of the head of the pro-separation referendum leader, he went and did his concession speech on the night of the referendum, and basically blamed non-white people. He basically said that like brown people and immigrants ruined Quebec's chances at freedom, and the sort of Quebecois separatist movement really, really went downhill after that. Step Back sent me down the leftist YouTuber rabbit hole a few years ago, and it's part of. Hey, that's awesome. I'm glad I could have helped you there. Do you have any thoughts on why Canada has such a much stable political culture than compared to the U.S.? The thing about Canada is that our stability kind of comes from the fact that we only really have one political party. Realistically, like we have one political party that has run the country for almost 3/4 of the time that Canada's been a country. It's been under one political party, which, first of all, Canada's not as stable as you think it is, but two, a lot of it is because we have the one political party that is like hopelessly corrupt, but also everybody's too afraid to vote for a more progressive party, and they don't want to vote for the Conservatives, so they just keep winning elections. Losers making concession speeches. What novelty is this? Yeah, it's not like what's it called? Donald Trump, who's being a big whiny baby. He's crying so hard because he did. What's it called? He's like, I don't get to be president anymore. Wah, wah, wah. People didn't want me because I tried to kill a lot of them. Do you think Joe Biden's victory will help liberals, conservatives, or hopefully the NDP? I feel like Joe Biden's going to have a really good relationship with Justin Trudeau. The two of them are pretty similar politically, and I imagine that they will do just fine. Maybe Trump being gone will kind of take the stink out of right-wing politics for some people who were kind of sketchy that Trumpism was going to infiltrate the Conservative Party, and it kind of tried and it failed in the last election, so maybe that'll help the Conservatives. Because people can feel like they can vote Conservative again without having the stink of Donald Trump on them. Which, like, anyone doesn't know. You go outside of America and everybody fucking hates Donald Trump. Except for, like, I don't know, Brazilians or something. Anyways, what's the next question? Oh, we already did. We kind of did the Pinochet question, so let's go on to the next one. My partner is still on Facebook, and she's noticed an abhorrent amount of photos of children being blurred out, including children from popular memes. And we're wondering if this is part of a whole QAnon Save the Children BS, or are we just experiencing confirmation? Also, apparently people are being called a pedo for posting a pic of a child. What the hell? Oh, Mark, I don't even know how to begin answering this question. I don't know if that's QAnon or it's just like people Like, I know there are people who don't want to. There are people who don't want to help. Like, who don't want to help or don't want to show their kids' faces because they're too young to really consent to having their picture put on Facebook. But that's like the only thing I can think of. Russia loves Trump. Well, of course, Russia loves Trump. I mean, I don't know. Russia's not a monolith. It's a huge ass country, but. Isn't Biden way to the right of Trudeau? Yes, but also Trudeau. What's it called? Trudeau is way to the right of the Canadian public. Like, I think that Trudeau and Biden have just like Trudeau and Obama had a very good relationship, and Trudeau doesn't care about. Like, Trudeau, if he was given, the political opportunity, he would privatize healthcare, and he would do a lot of the same things. It's just that he knows that's not politically possible because Canadians would riot, so he wouldn't do it. But like, I do think that like when it comes to things that Canada and America can agree upon, which is like neoliberal free trade agreements and stuff like that, like Trudeau and Biden will be fucking peas in a pod. Yeah, they'll be best friends. What would actually happen if healthcare was privatized in Canada? Would that be enough to push people over the edge, or simply protest and shrug it off? I don't know. I get worried about what might happen, because like what's going to happen is going to be like the UK, where they're just going to chip it away little bits at a time until at some point we just don't even have public healthcare anymore. But I do feel like it's it is something that Canadians take very seriously. So if somebody did like a legislation, like if we got another like Margaret Thatcher type person who tried to like just gut our healthcare programs, it would, first of all, it'd be tough because public healthcare is in our constitution, so you'd have to do a constitutional amendment, and part of that, like most Canadian constitutional changes, usually result in a referendum, and I get a feeling that Canadians would not vote on a referendum to privatize healthcare, so. I think that would be a holdup. But if it somehow still went through, and if it did go through at that point, then they would consider like, oh well, we voted for it with the referendum. So, is a constitutional amendment as hard as it is in the U.S.? No, we change our constitution all the time. Our constitution is only like 40 years old, so. Making changes to the Constitution is not that hard. Should Canadians be able to choose healthcare? Yeah, just word the referendums. Yeah, that's definitely a way they could do it. Obama said he read Marx and Foucault to try to get with girls who are really into those guys' respective philosophies. Does that mean Michelle was super into neoliberalism when they met? I don't know. I don't actually know when he met Michelle Obama. I don't know. That wasn't really a question though, was it? That was just trying to make a goof. Good goof. She was just like, I just love Hayek. Can you read Hayek and the Chicago Boys? That's the only way I'm going to be really impressed. What's so good about Swiss democracy? The other day when the chat referred to the U.S. as the greatest democracy on earth and you jokingly asked them if they met Switzerland, what was that about? Switzerland is, if you had to have a country with representative democracy, Switzerland, I think, is doing it best. So Switzerland doesn't have a singular leader who rules the country, which I think is like one of the weird holdovers from the monarchy that we should probably get rid of. Like the fact that like we still have this concept in our head that every country has to have a singular person who represents the country. Maybe we should ditch that. So Switzerland has like a council that runs the country of like, I think like 7 people. And then on top of that, a lot of the decisions about what to do in Switzerland is broken down into local communes. And a lot of those communes, their decisions, political decisions, are made through direct democracy. Like people actually vote on issues a lot. And so Switzerland's like a tiny, tiny, tiny country, but that feels like a way better system of democracy. Feels way more like something like democratic confederalism or something like that. It's not, but it feels like something more close to that than like what the semi-autonomous cantons. Yeah, it's Switzerland's system is very different from other representative democracies, and in my opinion, a lot of the differences sound like they're way better than what we have. You don't treat your constitution like a holy document? No. So I know that the Americans do that with their constitution. The British kind of do it with Magna Carta, although not nearly as much. But yeah, the Canadian Constitution was signed and was like made in 1980, and we've only changed it a handful of times. Like I think that the last time, like as you guys remember, the last time it happened was with Bill C-16, where we tried to change the hate speech law to include transphobia, and it led to what's his face having a fucking meltdown, the Canadian Human Rights Code or whatever. What's it called? To have fucking Lobster Boy have a meltdown. That's how freaking Jordan Peterson's entire career started. Gordon P. Jeterson. Yeah, exactly. If you don't say his name, and if you say his name more than 3 times, they start ruining the chat. See, like, I miss the days when Jordan Peterson was just a shitty psychologist who was always on Steve Piken. So you guys don't know is that fucking Lobster Boy has been a fixture of the Ontario, like, what's it called? The Ontario media scene for ages, because he would just always be on the agenda with Steve Piken. You make me really happy is to find out what will happen. Nothing makes me happier than imagining what like Buckingham Palace, what the mood at Buckingham Palace will be when Scotland votes to leave the United Kingdom. Oh man, you remember the last time they did the referendum in 2014, and like the Queen was like, "Oh, I would be so heartbroken if the people that we've been fucking over for 4 centuries were finally free." What will happen? I think her favorite castle's in Scotland, and she would lose her castle, maybe? Oh, poor Queen. I listened to a podcast interview with someone who was attacked at the Million MAGA March. At one point, she said, "These aren't just school bullies. We can't ignore them and they go away." Made me wonder. I also listened to The Worst Year Ever. Made me wonder, do you think people who grow up to be white nationalists are more likely to have been school bullies or have been targeted by school bullies? Oh, I don't know. I imagine that it makes very little difference, to be honest. Maybe they were probably more often bullies, I guess. I don't know. Kind of underselling with 4 centuries, aren't you? Yeah, I just went conservatively with like the Union of the Crowns. The Queen is a symbol embodied in flesh, indoctrinated yet lauded over by many. Ooh. Yes, and I would love if the Queen lived a happy and fruitful life in one of her castles and was not the Queen of the United Kingdom because the United Kingdom has become a republic. Just abdicate your title. Just break the title. No more kingdom. No monarchy. And just go live in your castle. Sell a bunch of your shitty land and be ridiculously rich. And just have you and all of your malformed children just live there forever. And we never have to think of you again. I know she doesn't deserve a castle. But, like, if it gets her out of the house... Okay, yeah. I don't really have much to say about this. Are white nationalists former bullies or former bullied? Because I could see people coming to white nationalism either way. The people who get into like this white supremacist shit, they can come in. They come into it through various different ways. I want Buckingham Palace to become a public housing unit. That, I feel like, would be the ultimate symbol that Britain's changed for the better. Alright. You know that Townsend video we watched the other day where revolutionary soldiers allowed to hunt for meat to supplement what they got in their rations? I know I'd take fresh squirrel or dove meat over old salt preserved pork or beef. I imagine they would be allowed to, but I also imagine that that would be difficult, especially in like leaner times. The other thing that they didn't mention in that video is that often, like, well, not often, but you know, it was not uncommon for revolutionary soldiers to also get food from their families, unless they were like really off the beaten path. So there is that too. I imagine hunting was not part of it, and also like foraging for like, you know, mushrooms and tubers and stuff too. I think we should get rid of the monarchy, but practically, what difference does it make for material conditions? I mean, the UK spends a shit ton of money on the royal family that they could then spend on not having 1 in 5 people in Glasgow living in poverty, as an example. Maybe just like not give shit tons of money to the crown. That's like one thing you would end up not doing. And, you know, the Queen owns, what's it called? The Crown owns a lot of property that could be converted into public housing and all sorts of things that could be used for the public good instead of just being some rich asshole's house that they only use like 2 weeks a year. And yeah, there is that whole weird argument, like the sort of like CGP Grey argument that the monarchy is actually good because they bring in all the tourists. It's like, okay, lots of countries have, like, you know, remnants of their monarchy that are no longer, that a monarchy that no longer exists, and it doesn't like people don't go, people like, it's not like what's it called, Versailles is abandoned because everyone's like, psh, I'm not gonna go to Versailles. There isn't even a king living there. Like, whatever. It's a shitty argument, and it is not based in reality. Shouldn't be converted into public housing for historical value. I mean, you could also turn Buckingham Palace into a museum of the English monarchy. I guess that's one thing you could do. But also, people, what's it called? London has a very big lack of public housing. So, I don't know. I'll pay money to see a queen who won't ever die. She's like, what, 90-something now? She's gotta go at some point. And I have a feeling that there's a lot of people who might tolerate the throne for fucking Queen Elizabeth II because she's like been queen for like 1,000 years. But like, you know, do you, are people gonna really go to bat to defend the monarchy for fucking King Charles? The fucking like half molten king? There's talk of her abdicating. Is that real or no? Isn't Charles like notoriously a piece of shit? I mean, he like cheated on his wife a whole lot, and like, yeah, he's also a prince, which like, I can't think of a prince who wouldn't be an asshole. When a wizard is transphobic, does that mean that they can't cast transmutation spells? Ooh. Yes. They're transmutation phobic. The fascist party of the Netherlands had its leader abdicate an hour ago. Well, that's good news, I think. Since JFK assassination anniversary just passed, as a historian, do you have the inside scoop? Yes, I have this. Here's what really happened on 11/23/64. That the president of the United States was assassinated by a man named Lee Harvey Oswald, who shot him twice with a rifle that he was very good at aiming with because he was a trained Marine. And he did so because of some misguided loyalty to Cuba and severe mental illness. Okay, now moving on. No further questions. Charles is kind of bad at staying politically neutral, which is a big problem. Yeah, that could be a problem too. I mean, him and Bojo would get along swimmingly, but isn't Bojo also like not long for this world politically? Like, isn't he having kind of a moment? Isn't his party turning on him now too? Prince Charles concern. Yeah, maybe a Prince Charles. Maybe when we get King Charles the number. I don't know what his number is. That will end up with some like, just like absolute like the monarchy will just end. Maybe that'll be nice. I mean, I'm probably not the first person who said that the British monarchy is being kept alive by the beating heart of Elizabeth II, and basically the second that she's gone, it's just done. Charles III? All right. What's Charles' political alignment? I don't know, but I imagine it's bad, given the life he's led. I don't know much about what Charles's political beliefs are. I don't imagine that he was like a Jeremy Corbyn supporter, though. The youngers have no interest in being monarchs. Yeah, probably. If only we could just skip along to William's like 3-year-old daughter. She's 3. I wouldn't wish that kind of a horrible fate on a 3-year-old girl. That feels like a terrible life to live. Yeah. Most think they'll change his name to King Edward because King Charles has been notoriously bad in history. Is King Charles the one that was killed during the English Civil War? I don't know. I don't know that much about European history, so I don't know much about British kings. But yeah, Charles does see. In that case, I would think that King Charles would be a pretty cursed name. This is a question for Mia. Has Trump made centrists and liberals disillusioned with the idea of populism or even democracy in general? On his podcast the other day, Ben Burgess reminded us that 4 years ago, a lot of libs were writing articles and think pieces praising technocracy and asking if we know about human psychology, might democracy be a bad idea? Yeah, what's it called? Obama's already said that, like, the internet is like destroying political discourse because everybody can have a talk and there's no rich people to filter everything out for you. And so, yeah, I do think that definitely there is a liberal tendency to want to end democracy and like push for like this kind of technocratic state. I could totally see that. Thank you, Marinigma. Thank you for following. Welcome to the York Gang. She's gonna have a light in the spotlight no matter what. Yeah, but I wouldn't want any, like, what's it called? I don't know. I don't want anyone to be queen. I don't want queens. I don't want kings. I don't want duchesses and dukes and counts and earls. I just want none of them. Get un-aristocrat. Just make it go away. You're the first person in literally years to pronounce this handle correctly, and I appreciate it. Well, there you go. Mir Enigma. Alrighty. the thing about the liberal obsession with technocracy, apparently, I haven't listened to this podcast yet, but I am eager to chew on it, which is this podcast called The West Wing thing, which sort of is a watch through of The West Wing, but it's sort of done with the thesis that The West Wing is sort of responsible for poisoning American politics on the like in like centrist circles. And I'd be very curious to see how that turns out. So I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, like the biggest one. The other thing that to kind of point to this question here, there's like the whole like technocratic idea of like nudge programs and stuff like that, where it's like they don't want people to be able to choose to do things or to basically they don't want people to choose to not obey the state, and so they've like delved deep into like subtle psychological tricks, like stuff that like advertisers use to make like women have eating disorders so that they buy products. They use like these kinds of like small techniques to basically try to get people to become obedient servants of the state. And I could see in the future us having psychology so well understood that like not only do we all live brutally oppressed by the state with no real free will of our own, but we don't even think that we're being oppressed because they just like know how to manipulate monkey brains to want to be servants to the upper class, and that is fucking terrifying. There's a dystopian novel right there. That sounds unethical. I can't imagine our leaders would do that. Like, what's it called? There's a program in the UK called the Nudge Program, which literally is them trying to do that. And it was such a success that many other governments have picked up nudge techniques. There's a book called Nudge that is sort of doing this. Liberals already exist. Good answer. Any more questions? Yeah, there's tons. Good thing I have infinity to get to them, right? During the Cold War, did Finlandization affect all of Scandinavia or just Finland? Oh, that one's from Mia. Okay. Thoughts on Hugo Chavez and his legacy, aside from rigging elections from beyond the grave? I think that there's a good statement that kind of encapsulates like what Hugo Chavez has done to specifically like Latin American politics, which is at the inauguration of the new president of Bolivia. There's an inauguration coming soon, and or it's already happened. But the MAS, the indigenous-led Social Democratic Party, invited to the presidential inauguration Hugo Chavez's successor, Nicolas Maduro. And the opposition, the like fascist people who are like, what's it called, the far right, white supremacist, Christian supremacist people who brought the giant Bible into it, are inviting Juan Guaido to the same event, which I think shows to me, like I think Hugo Chavez has been shown that it is possible to start and build an indigenous-led because like the thing is like income inequality in Latin America is really, really bad. And these like indigenous-led, like left of center program, like movements, I feel like are a political trend in Latin America that could be very successful if maneuvered in a big way, and it has been very successful in several countries. And I hope that the Chavista movement sort of builds up and stuff. Is there a scene of The West Wing where a character gives a speech about how outsourcing is good? Actually, oh yeah, the book is the show is completely full of like neoliberal bullshit. So I hope that like the sort of legacy of Hugo Chavez, of the indigenous-led socialist movements trying to free their economy from basically being owned by U.S. corporations. I hope that continues. Do you think places like India or Ireland would ever become single political units if English/British haven't invaded and treated several disunited regions as a single province? No. I do think that, especially in the cases of England or of Ireland and India, that they only exist as a single political unit because of the common experience of being colonized by the English. Just like how there was no such thing as a Native American before Europeans arrived and took several independent nations and gave them a title. Put a name to their collective identity. And because of centuries of colonization, that identity became a real identity. And yeah. Fucking nailing these questions. All right. All right. The next question we got here is from Matt. It's, what's your opinion on the Rick Mercer report? This hour has 22 minutes in the Beaverton. I don't think I've seen any Rick Mercer reports. This hour has 22 minutes has never once told a funny joke. Ever. It is like, imagine if Saturday Night Live, but even less funny and Canadian. I have literally never once laughed at a joke from This Hour Has 22 Minutes. And the Beaverton, the Beaverton's legit good. I like the Beaverton. I am quite a bit of a Beaverton enjoyer. Was Hugo Chavez Native? I believe he was. He was either Native or he was like a kind of like mixed race. Like the majority in a lot of South American countries, the majority of the population are classified as mestizo, which is sort of a mix of European and indigenous. The problem, though, is that each country has about like a 9 to 12% white population that have all of the money and dominate a lot of like the imperial politics, where they just have, Western, mostly American corporations own all of their natural assets and funnel money back to America. Are you familiar with Edward Bernays' work propaganda and his role in advertising and PR? Yeah. Can't stay long, but I wanted to say hi. Loved your most recent video here, and I just want to shut up. Can't wait for Tuesday's stream. Awesome. Well done, Trump. Thank you for... I am familiar with, Bernays and propaganda. He thought it was good. Let's see. I don't know if I offended Matt Lipton by saying I've never once laughed at This Hour Has 22 Minutes. I don't know if that's gotten to YouTube yet. All right. Let's see. What's the next question? A while back, one of the progressive atheists I follow wrote a blog where he criticized Sam Harris for his Islamophobia, but also said that since supposed progressives send death threats to Sam's daughter on social media, we can't really expect him to listen to anything we have to say. Thoughts on that take? I mean, you probably shouldn't threaten the life of Sam Harris's daughter on social media. That's not a good thing to do. Definitely don't do that. I mean, I agree to an extent. I do think that, what's it called? Doing like those kinds of things. Like the thing is, like, what we don't realize is even Sam Harris doesn't make, actually, especially Sam Harris, but like people don't typically come to positions through logical reasoning. It very rarely happens. Especially big changes like I decided to not be racist towards brown people, which is what people are trying to get Sam Harris to do. So I would argue that on that note, that we should think things through more in idea of narratives and emotion, because like people were like, oh, like why are there so many people who are anti-communist in Eastern Europe? And it's because like people in Estonia have a pretty good history of like the Stalinist Soviet Union invading and conquering their country and killing their family and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, yeah, that shit sticks. That's why you can't, like, what's it called? The ends do not justify the means. And so, yeah, like, what's it called? You're more likely to double down and be shitty if you know, if your detractors are threatening people on social media. Alrighty. On that note, it's 2:00. I really like this new system of questions through the form. So if you have a question that I didn't answer and you submitted it to the thing, I will get to it at a future stream. If not, here's a link to where you can submit questions. I'll be going back to it tomorrow night on Tuesday. Thank you guys all for coming out. I'm going to go find somebody to raid. Let's raid the Possum Queen. Formerly known as Rocketansky. But yeah, I really liked the ability to talk to the chat was really fun and really engaging, and I really like that a lot, and I hope to do more of that tomorrow night. And yeah, the questions, I don't know, I feel like we did it well. This is much better than it was, so thank you. Now let's go all see the Possum Queen. So in the meantime, you know, take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you guys tomorrow night.